Hello, everyone. I think there's a background noise in here.
Can you hear me, Afsa?
Yeah, I can hear you absolutely. How are you doing today? After
I'm
a
I'm
lot
doing
of
good.
technical
Yeah,
difficulties, we managed to go live
finally
here.
finally we
Yeah,
managed to do it.
awesome. I am hoping that everybody else can hear us as well. So if you are here joining us live, just hop in below and say hi, say salam, so that we know that you are able to hear us. Because we've had a lot of technical difficulties, and we want to make sure this show is live and we are audible. Thank you. So I'm gonna start this, Humaira, and सबसे पहले तो मेरा question ये होगा, ये शो का टॉपिक जो आपने नाम दिया है, यूजुअली मुझे जब नाम आते हैं या कुछ ऐसी चीज क्रिएटिविटी जहन में आती है वो सोते में आती है। आपको ये नाम कैसे जहन में आया?
अच्छा अच्छा, इसके मल्टीपल बैकग्राउंड्स हैं। पहले तो ये मैंने एक कम्युनिटी शुरू की थी आज से कुछ 2017 में, जो कि जिसका नाम सोलफुली योर्स था। और आई स्टार्टेड टेकिंग इंटरव्यूज एंड डूइंग कॉन्वर्जेशंस
हम्म।
बैक फ्यू years back. तो
ओके।
that was the start that I took. But
हम्म।
ये नाम का concept कहाँ से आया? I wanted a platform wherein
हम्म।
we could come together without any uh, differences, in the form that we are there is something, a common thing that we all share. And when
हम्म।
I realized that soul is the thing that we all of us, we share. That is the one thing that unites the humanity, wherein there is no good or bad or right or wrong in having different identities, because that's what, as human beings, we have a human
हम्म।
identity and we have a
हम्म।
soul. So why the identity is important, and where we need to come together and connect together, is that I wanted a platform where we are able to accept each other the way we are, without
हम्म।
uh, without passing any kind of judgments or labels or stereotyping. Just accept
हम्म।
our own personal truths and come together and share our life journeys, our stories, our experiences, without judging each other or without putting each other into labels of good or bad, right or wrong. So that was the concept. That's why I wanted this name, wherein, as humans, we have gender, we have race, we have language, we have
हम्म।
religion, we have lineage, we have so many things, and that is important. I'm not saying that is not important. It is important.
हम्म।
While in this space is also important, where we connect without those differences.
Okay, awesome. And when we talk about connections, when we talk about talk about like being without differences, without labeling, and I think this is something that prevails in this world today, and it has been prevailing in the world since the world came into being. So what do you think, what is that one thing when we say soulfully yours, and when we say that we're connected through souls, what is that one thing that connects us? What should we be seeking? I mean, I know when we are at a platform, when we're talking, when we are in a social circle, we see people as different people. What is that one thing that we can look into for this soul connection, that we can be together, we can bond together, we can connect together?
I think we need to go back to our history of origin, and that is the common home that we used to share
Hmm.
back when we were in
Absolutely.
the human form. And that people
Hmm.
call it home, people call it heaven, we call it
Hmm.
Jannah. That's a common thing, that's a common belonging that we all have, and we used to live there, right? So that is
Hmm.
the concept, wherein let me share a story. Back in my childhood, I used to play with my cousins who were twins. So they were
Hmm.
identical twins, and they have shared a home together. So, and I used at that time I didn't understand, but now when I reflect back, I realize, okay, both of them, they had the kind of telepathy, they could understand each other feelings, and I was obviously the odd one out, not understanding them. But अगर एक if एक का bangle टूट गया, the other one she would break hers too. So that kind of, because they shared the same home for 9 months. Obviously, with years that it gets disconnected, you go with the life. But then I realized at one point, I remember that itni connection hone ke bawajood within the identical twins, when they went to school, we were in the same school. When they went to school, they were in separate houses. And at that time, our houses were named like the English poets, Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats. So they were, one was in Shelley and the other one was in Keats. And then I noticed that just demarcating or a different box में डाल के कि you belong to that house and you belong to that house, they started having a fight and a debate or whatever you may call it. And I realized how come jabke they have so, the bond is so strong, just defining into two separate houses, जबकि कीट शैली इन लोगों से हमारा आई मीन कोई ब्लड कनेक्शन नहीं, हमारा कोई हिस्टोरिकल लिनेज नहीं, सिर्फ जस्ट बिकॉज यू बिलोंग टू दिस स्लॉट एंड आई बिलोंग टू दिस स्लॉट, we are divided. So then I realized कि यार we are connected at a soul level, but we are what, and then first this, the second thing I realized, the opposite thought. The opposite thought was, why is it important to be divided? Because there is no good and bad, there's no right or wrong. Why are we divided into tribes or races or genders and etc.? This came as a reflection during the pandemic. Earlier, I wrote it in my book, but it was not an experiential learning that we are divided into like tribes or communities. So that one community is living, let's say, in an area where there's winter or cold. The other is, so it is very necessary for survival and existence when people are belonging to different, have different experiences, so that we can learn from the experiences of each other. But during the pandemic, it was an experiential learning wherein agar covid एक time पर पूरी दुनिया पे आ जाता, we would never had, we couldn't survive otherwise. एक जगह रीजन पे आया, we learned अच्छा ये करना है, okay, then दूसरी रीजन पे hit किया, so we were prepared, learning from the older experience के यार ऐसे किया था, so we should not repeat it. Otherwise, the humans would have become extinct. So that is why we are divided into different communities, different lineages or races, so that we can learn from people belonging from different backgrounds, with different perceptions, with different experiences. We can have that collective intelligence. So that is why this division is important. However, belonging to a race or belonging to a community, there is nothing wrong in it. We have that human tendency to belong. But if we divide and stereotype or label each other and say, no, you are wrong, I'm right, that is where we cross we lose the purpose of it. And that is where things go wrong, where, Black Lives matters comes in, when these things happen, wherein we think that we are a superior race, or we are a superior gender, or we are a superior religion, or things like that. So when we, belonging is good, but being right because you belong to a certain territory or certain race, that is where it goes beyond the concept. And so this is about belonging and division, and wherein the other concept, the opposite thought again of existing peacefully and soulfully, wherein we have a common ground, we have a common belonging. That is the concept wherein you can have two opposite thoughts at the same time without judging them, either of them, as right or wrong. Both of them can stand equally right and equally wrong. That's the concept.
So going back to the story that you just shared, would that be a correct way to say that the way we respond to these differences is solely because of the conditioning, because ultimately, because the story that you shared, they shared that bond, they shared that connection, but when the conditioning changed, it affected the human behavior. So would that be correct to say that it is all because of conditioning, and this is something that we can control, being parents, being children, being siblings? Is that so?
Absolutely. You use the right word. Conditioning is something that then defines us of who we are not, or what we are supposed to be.
Supposed to be.
So yeah, conditioning, it could be societal conditioning, parental conditioning, wherein you forget your true self, who you actually are. And I think it's a process, and everyone goes through that process, where in you need to understand that conditioning is important for
Hmm.
survival, for existence.
Hmm.
It is important, but then where is that boundary where it goes as blind following, or it goes without questioning yourself, that why are you doing what you are doing, or why are you feeling the way you are feeling, just going with the flow. That is where it goes wrong. So there, what I believe is that there is good in everything. There is good in every bad, and there is bad in every good. Nothing is 100% pure,
Absolutely.
except the divine being, that is the almighty. That is
Okay.
absolutely pure. But as we no matter how good we are, how perfect we try to be, there would be an element of bad in it. Or no matter
Hmm.
how bad we are, there would be a light or a spark, something that's good in us.
All right. You just mentioned a phrase here, the true self. And I think in the coaching world, I've been working with coaches a lot, and this phrase is coming up very, very often. What is your definition of true self? What does it mean to be in your true self, in your authentic self, in your true identity? And how does one actually identify? I mean, is it someone who's going to teach us how to find your true self, or is it the personal journey that one goes through? First,
I think
identify what
it's,
you think is true self.
as you mentioned, that with conditioning we lose our true self, right? So for
Mhm.
me, true self, as we call it in Arabic, fitra, that's
Okay.
the natural code that we have
Hmm.
been coded with. That's the true self. And with time, as we grow, that gets hidden with layers of conditioning, one after the other.
Hmm.
The society tells you how to eat, how to dress, how to speak, and stuff like that, and as a matter of fact, my teachers are my children, because they were the purest form of fitra that I could learn from.
Hmm.
As they were growing, I was learning and identifying my true self, because I used to observe them and I used to ask them, why are they doing whatever they're doing? Instead of saying them not to do that, I would observe why
Hmm.
they were the ones who were getting up early in the morning. I was the one who was sleeping until
Hmm.
late. So that was the true self that I had been distanced throughout the years. So
Hmm.
that's the fitra that I say that truly is. That's the natural code that every human being has. And because of the conditioning, we have become different. And obviously, again, there's no good and bad. We need to process and identify. It's basically the layers of ego that we can say, that once we are able to
Hmm.
shed those layers of ego, then we can see our true self. When we are
Hmm.
able to shed the beliefs that we have that no longer serve us, when we're able to shed those layers of ego, then I believe we can be in our true light or true self, whatever you
So,
call it.
how does one break their ego? How does one go back to their true self? I know it sounds a lot more pleasant to hear and read, but when it comes to practicality in real life, I think it's a completely different journey. So, just shed some light on how one can go back to their inner self, or how can, just a little example maybe, how can one break their ego? I remember in our yoga class, we used to do this ego breaking exercise that I've never been a part of. Hopefully, I will be, but just curious, what is And I think also, before you tell me how can one break their ego, also define what ego is. I think ego is not just always in the negative sense, but it is also something positive. How you see ego as, and what are the different variations of ego, and how can one break past the walls of ego.
It's a very good question, and it's a terrible journey. It's not
It's
easy. The
terrible.
ego, yeah, it's the transformation. It's not easy. The ego death itself is very dark. People call it dark night of the soul. Some call it spiritual awakening. There are different words for that. But the
Hmm.
moment the self wants to define itself, it wants a title.
Hmm.
Starting from the name, the self wants to have an identity of its own, and that's the ego. I my name is this, I belong to this, my parents are this, my family is this,
Hmm.
my country is this, my title is this, my work is this, stuff like this. These are all that define our identity, our ego, and then comes another layer. That's the foundation of ego. That are the beliefs that we have told ourselves since childhood, that has worked for us. Might not work later, but that are the
Hmm.
core foundation of ego. The beliefs that we think that are important for us. These
Hmm.
are different layers that we wear one after another, and because at certain point of time they work for us, we think that they are going to carry us forward throughout our life. But it's
Hmm.
at a certain point in your life, some people call it spirit, I mean MLC, or spiritual puberty, or stuff where you question yourself that why are you existing in this universe, what's the purpose.
Hmm.
To reach this point itself is a journey half done, because
Hmm.
most of our lives we are not at a level of consciousness where we ask ourselves, yeah, zinda kyun hai, kya kaam hai, what's the purpose. But
True.
if you look around in nature, everything has a purpose. Then we as human beings, or we as ashraful makhluk, I mean, we cannot be created without a purpose. So the
Hmm.
realization itself, when we reach that, I am created for a purpose, or you are created for a purpose, is a level of consciousness that we have reached, where we now can question ourselves that, okay, Hafsat, or Humera, what's the purpose of life? Why do we exist? What's this all about? So at this point, when you have reached this point, then the journey actually starts. And when the journey starts,
Hmm.
then you start questioning the curiosity element. You start questioning each and everything: why, what, how, and stuff like that. And the secret of questioning is that if you question, you will always get an answer, but you
Hmm.
should be prepared to and ready to get the answer, because answers and knowledge and insights, they do not come easy. They never come easy. So if you are on this journey, or if you see people who have been through this journey or through this awakening, their life wouldn't have been a bed of roses. I mean, people reach to certain insights through suffering, through pain, through disasters or disease or anything that would it could be
Trigger it.
it could trigger that. So anything can
Hmm.
trigger that, and once it's triggered, there's no way back, because once your level of
Hmm.
consciousness has raised, you won't accept a lesser standard. You won't ever. So
Hmm.
that's a journey that one has to do, and it's a
Hmm.
personal journey, a personal truth for everyone. It's a unique experience.
Yeah, actually, this was my next question. That because a lot of times we see people who are on this path is as a result of a trauma or a disease or something that they've been going through, and then they start questioning. So is it always like, if I want to go on this journey, would I be prepared to take a trauma or something? Because most of the time it is a result of a trauma that I see around. People start questioning because this is when something goes wrong in their lives. Could it be a happy onboarding as well? Just a question before we exit.
It can start as a happy onboarding wherein you don't know where the road would take you to.
Hmm.
As for in my case, it was a thirst or a quench for learning, for
Hmm.
finding like a pursuit of truth. So when you start questioning, then easy after the easy questions, there are very tough questions. And
Absolutely.
as I said, the secret is when you ask the question, you'll get the answer. And when you'll get the answer, it could be very terrible, it could be scary,
Yeah.
but it is how it is.
Hmm. And
So,
I think
yeah,
that's where the role of people like you come in. When we are on this journey, we need a mentorship, we need a support. And that's where people, again, people like you and many other coaches come in because they have been through that journey. And that's how they can, guide you, support you through this. Because every one of us needs a support, a moral support. And I also feel that this is something that might not always come from your parents or siblings, the right kind of support when you're undergoing through this journey. So yeah, again, going back, it is going to be terrible, but there are support.
yes. The thing about family is that they know us from this much when we are small.
Mm,
So it's a human tendency to see the person उसी perception से जो पहला बना था. They have seen
mm,
you grow, but obviously they don't relate with you with your personal journey, and they have their own fears that they can project on you while you are on any kind of journey.
absolutely.
And
Yes, totally.
that is the conditioning that you have to break and see the wider horizon. I'm not saying that
Mm,
they are wrong or right.
mm,
I'm not putting them in any kind of right or wrong thing. I'm just saying that for the wider horizon, you need to see the other side of the coin, and for that, you need to break the perception that you have or your family has it.
mm,
Otherwise, the best thing is that if you have the tendency to have two opposite thoughts in your mind
mm,
at the same time without associating yourself with any of them, is the best way
mm,
you can see your true self.
mm,
It's the two extremes. If you're as for me, I have been living in extremes. So I've always been called digital, or I was a defined child thanks to my parent who have raised me the and to this time, because I was like, for my mother, and now when I have to parent my children, it reminds me of my childhood, wherein whenever she would say something, I'll go opposite. So that was part of my journey, as how I learned polarities, or how I learned to neutralize polarities, because I saw both highs and lows of both the sides. So that's
mm,
how I learned and took this journey.
mm,
And I believe this kind of journey is very unique, and it is based on personal truths. Everyone has to वो कहते हैं एक गालिब का शेर है ना, ये इश्क नहीं आसान इतना समझ लीजिए, एक आग का दरिया है और डूब के जाना है. So वो डूबे बगैर आप हैप्पी गो लकी, वो वाला
right.
that phase would be a
Mm,
honeymoon period, but then later you have to dive in to the
mm.
depths of the discovery to find out yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. What a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much, Mamera. And while we were talking about the ego and everything, something hit my mind, but I think that is what I'm going to keep for the next episode. And it is also a term that has been used very often in the coaching world, especially in the world that you are working in. What is shadow? So I think this is what we're going to keep for the next episode. What is shadow? What is shadow mastery? How do you identify shadows? And for now, thank you very much. And we are going to sign off. We'll see you next week, inshallah.
Thank you, Hafsa. It was a pleasure
You're welcome.
talking.
Welcome.
Okay.